doing this video kind of as an addendum to the other video where I just anecdotally mentioned about the Revolution Plus. Now we've used 4 vials, and we're monitoring and being assisted to monitor these four these 4 animals. Now it would appear that one of the animals was infected with multiple parasites. Looks like 2. Um, we have probably Demodex cati or Gatoi, but I think it's cati, and then ear mites. I mean, it could be sarcoptic, but I don't think so. I think it's Demodex cati. I think I could be wrong, but because it was supposed samples were supposed to be sent to the lab, but I guess it wasn't done. And then we have ear mites, which I forget the species. I can't. Sorry. Apparently, something has exacerbated my allergies and my asthma. But anyway, so we're monitoring them. But it would appear that one animal that was on Revolution apparently got an infestation. We're not sure if it's ear mites or if it's one of the Demodex species. And a couple of other of the animals are being, they're still being plagued a little bit. Now, none of us have found any evidence of hot spots or leathering skin or puffing skin or flaking skin or anything other than minor skin trauma from itching. So that leaves a big ambiguous question mark if these are actually parasites or it's miliary dermatitis or another kind of skin allergy. Again, skin scrapings is key, but it can add up when you don't have a lab. I wish I had a microscope. I would do my own labs, but I don't have a microscope. Not that kind of microscope. I wish I did. I test my own skin scrapings and hair samples from all the animals. But that being said, it would appear that since multiple animals are still being plagued by something, but it's not taking a hold, that there's some residual effect, but still, when parasites jump on these animals, the selamectin and I'm pretty sure it's terrafin. I'd have to check the compound. But you have double action there. Not only do you have selamectin in the bloodstream, but also it passes into the oils and it passes into the hair follicles. So, all of these should be dead, especially ear mites. Now, Demodex Gatoi and Cati, they have a different mechanism that they infect. One affects the hair follicles and one affects the skin itself. Sorry. So, again, without skin scrapings and the identification of the particular subspecies, we're not totally sure. But still, it would appear that this revolution has been denatured because it's an off-label use, but it's an off-label use that 80 to 90% of the time it is effective in killing all Demodex. Now we have, I think it's Gatoy. Even humans have Demodex Gatoy on their skin. It's a skin mite. It eats skin flakes and stuff like that, and it feeds off of our oils. You know, I'm pretty sure it's Gatoy, um, or it's Gatoy scabies. No, I think sarcoptic mites are scabies. I think. I don't know, I forget. I better reread my microbiome. But anyway, that being said, there are some of these Demodex that live on every creature's skin. It eats our oils. It eats dead skin mites. Or I mean, it eats dead skin. They're a relative of dust mites. Um, but still, the amount of scratching we're seeing, that's targeted scratching around the neck and the ears, that we're all monitoring. Several people who are doing this. It kind of shows that something's not quite right. That possibly the revolution was denatured, which brings us to another issue. If it was, now this is the fault of the clinic, I would think, because it takes a lot of coordination to do this kind of tampering with products. Now we've seen it at some grocery stores, stuff that gets tampered with in the grocery store. Matter of fact, we've even seen people do it. And generally, nothing happens to them. Some branches of some stores around Saginaw County, the managers could care less. They just tell somebody, "Oh, we'll take care of it," and we went to another store and we found that food was tampered with, and the plastic open, and we caught them. We don't shop at the store anymore. We caught them. They actually put it back on the shelf. And at one store, I actually had somebody say to me when I returned a defective item, she said to me, she's like, "There's no package. How am I supposed to put it on the shelf?" I looked at her. I said, "This is a return. You can't put it back on the shelf." She didn't say anything because that's retail fraud. You have to specifically say on the label and specifically say on the shelf that it's an open box or it's a used item, but you can't sell used food. And electronics, a lot of the big box stores have very strict rules regarding electronics. They don't sell used electronics. It's all done through the mail. They do sell returns through the mail. That's some of the stuff you see online, and they say renovated or they say used item. Like even, Walmart. Actually, Walmart's the only one that does that. Oh, no, Best Buy does, but they specifically say in the advertisement what you're getting. It's required by law. Otherwise, it's retail fraud. Which, depending on the price of the item, could become a felony. So that being said, these particular things, you have a box. From what we've seen the past 8 years investigating this kind of stuff, you know, I don't quote people a lot, but I'm a very big fan of Elie Wiesel. And one thing that he said when he was interviewed in 1990 was he thinks the greatest plague to humanity is extremism of any kind, religious, financial, racial, political, any kind of extremism is the greatest plague on the planet because it always breeds great destruction. And I would have to add an addendum to that. Instigation is another great cancer on the planet because anytime you see instigators, we're watching Mutual of Omaha. Um, what's it called now? I think it's still called Wild America. I'm not sure, but anyway, I grew up watching this show, and I'm happy that my daughter likes to watch it. I grew up watching it for years. It's what made my interest in ecology become a lifelong thing. Even if it's not a career, it's a lifelong interest. And I've managed to plug my military and graduate training into it as well. Very rarely in force protection and law enforcement and intelligence do you find somebody informed about ecology because it opens up a whole door. You want to talk about southern border? Well, people trained in ecology will be very well suited to help inform about tunneling. Oh yeah, we see this here happening, this part of the desert via SAT. Uh, there's people tunneling there. Well, how can you tell? It looks like runoff to me. No, it's not. It's tunneling because we're seeing collapsing of the soil. Ecologists can recognize that. Up in the northern areas, Michigan, North Dakota, um, Washington, other states that are bordering New York, with the southern boundaries of Canada, also be able to recognize areas where there's a lot of people going back and forth. There's some areas in the northern bordering international borders where there's nothing there but a sign. No gate, no fence, nothing. So ecology does become very, very um, uh, applicable when it comes to forest protection and national security. It's very applicable. So that being said, some of the things that we have learned are that when it comes to product tampering, is that you can boxes, many boxes, such as pet pesticides or pet topical antiparasitics, they use spot gluing, and you can use super glue because it's lightly waxed cardboard, and that's what people do. But now it comes more difficult is the tinfoil part, the tinfoil capsules that these anti-parasitic capsules are in, or capulets. I guess it's a capulet, it's not really a capsule. These are more difficult, but it could probably be done. It could easily be done at the factory. And, anybody who's studied loss and prevention and who has an experience in that kind of, it's a kind of in criminal intelligence. Anybody who knows about that stuff knows that the kind of things that people can do, somebody gets hired or somebody has a friend or somebody's disgruntled and they know how the system works, they drop a piece of glass into powder, or they throw a little bit of wood dust in flour, or they drop a tiny piece of glass in beef in the puree, or they throw stones inside milk powder. There's all kinds of stuff people could do. All kinds of stuff. So when it comes to the tampering with the tinfoil pouches that these are in, like I said, that's a little more difficult. And sometime when I get some of this stuff, I'll have to inspect one of those pouches and try to figure out how they could be tampered with. But we've seen all kinds of stuff getting tampered with. You notice nowadays when you buy some of your products, there's no inner seal. It's becoming commonplace at some stores, and some of this stuff used to be sealed. The reason why, because in some places where there's a lot of instigators, they're tampering with stuff. Nobody will admit that, of course. They're just going to point a finger at me and say that guy's a lunatic. But I know what we've seen. We've seen products being tampered with, and it's covered up. And you ever wonder why 5 years ago, when you buy meat, it's all frozen? Now it's all thawed. Doesn't that, really make people wonder why? It was never, you never bought meat that's thawed before. Never. This is something new. It's only been done. Uh, I only know it's done in Saginaw, and it's starting to be done in Bay. I don't know about Midland or Genesee or Aranac. We haven't went that far shopping because people always destroy our vehicles or tamper with them. um, but I know when I used to shop in Flint a couple of years ago, it's about 4 years ago, you could get frozen meat. Even on the display, everything was frozen. It wasn't all thawed. So, because what it does is it leads to refreezing of meat, which leads to premature spoiling, and that makes people sick. So, that being said, money is no object to very bad people. And people who make that kind of comment, if they're a millionaire, they're an idiot. Because if they didn't have that attitude, they would probably already be going into being a billionaire. Money snowballs quickly when you use it responsibly, unless you're being targeted or you don't care. So, that being said, we'll post more about these antiparasitics for your pets. Uh, I mean, because uh, what would happen if they were denatured is they would be slightly effective, but only upon the first or second bite. It's supposed to be the minute the parasites touch the oils of the animal's skin, or they climb onto a hair follicle, and the various organic chemicals like blood, plasma, um, skin oils, that the minute they climb onto a hair follicle, that's where some of these creatures, that's where they enter the skin or where they lay their eggs. And when you pet your animal and they're infected with parasites, it's that sandy feeling in the fur. Those are eggs. And so that being said, um, they're supposed to be dead the minute they climb on a hair follicle. If they walk through a patch of oily skin, they're supposed to already be dead. They're not supposed to have the ability to bite. Yeah, they'll get killed on the bite. But the question is how long after they bite, how much they fed, because it affects their nervous system, these kind of compounds. It kills them, but did they get enough time to lay eggs? That's the only question one can't answer because it depends on how much has been denatured, if it has. If it's been denatured where they need to feed twice, which, yeah, if they had a small feeding and they fed again before they lay eggs, yeah, then it'll kill them the second time. But what if they fed once and then started to lay eggs and fed again? Now, after they lay eggs, they can't survive much longer after that. Some of these parasites, um, a day or two, that's their lifespan. Others, it's up to 3 weeks. Some of the mange mites and ear mites, you're talking several weeks is their lifespan. I think it's up to 2 to 4 weeks for an ear mite. And the other mites, the skin mites, mange mites, like Demodex, I think it's around there also. I mean, because they're related. These are all mites. They're just in various subspecies or in the same family, brother or sister species. But that's the only question we can't answer yet is things like that. If it has been denatured, it's very concerning though, because what it does do is it tortures your pets. They get better a little bit, and then all of a sudden a whole bunch hatch and they get bit a whole bunch again. And if they have an allergy to the saliva from the parasites, it throws their immune system into all kinds of heck. They may start losing fur. They're going to start itching erratically, but there's nothing there. They may get sick, get a fever. They may start losing their skin if there's too much of these parasites they're allergic to. And it delays their relief. Everything's denatured. Yeah, it helps to a certain point, but then you add on another treatment another month. They go through the same thing. Another treatment another month. They go through the same thing until you're looking at several months of your animal being tortured. And you may have parasites around the house. And like I said, some of these last a couple weeks. So they may not be able to mate and lay eggs, but they can jump on a foot. They can jump on the bottom of a pant leg. They can jump on a hair coming out of a paw. And then it starts all over again. So this is why we're posting it here. If I'm right, I could be wrong because, like I said, some of these pests are really resilient, and it's only 80 to 90%. Um, the studies, there's not a lot of them. There's a few, but 80 to 90% effectiveness regarding mange mites for things like revolution. But again, it's off-label use because there's anywhere from 1 to 10%. Um, the 20, I added that. Actually, the research that I've read about, it's around 90% effective. Uh, but again, it's off-label use because there's not enough studies and there aren't enough analytics to show exactly what is the percentage of effectivity against things like Demodex. Um, so that's why it's off-label use. But it's a heck of a lot better than a lime dip, which is going to stain your animal's fur. They may lose their fur, walking around without fur, um, which opens up a whole bunch of other issues, like they get bump injuries, they get pinch injuries, they get scratch injuries because they don't have their fur to protect their skin anymore when they're walking next to a piece of wood or walking by a bed frame or climbing on a countertop. So it also makes them cold, so there's a better chance they're going to get sick. It's more difficult to regulate. You try taking your clothes off and try to regulate your temperature. I'll say that. Without that tool given to them by God, it's very difficult to regulate their internal temperature with no hair. So we'll post more once we know more. But it's very concerning. I don't know where Revolution is packaged. Um, I would have to research that. But I'd really be curious if it's in the Midwest. I'd be very curious. But so we'll post more when we know more. But just be careful and be open with your vet when you go there or your vet tech. That hey, we're going to use this, but I want to monitor the animal and I want to make sure I'm helping my animal. That in the end we don't find out that it's useless, or we got to switch them to another parasitic, and and tax their system even more because now we're switching from one parasitic that maybe was hepatotoxic. Now we're going to go to one that's that's um, kidney toxic. I forget my kidney toxic. I forget my words. Anyway, not hepatotoxic. It is. I forget my words. Kidney toxic. Um, so it is your animal's age, and depending on their health before you got them, you don't want to wear down two systems. Is it going to affect the animal? If they have one system that's good, keep on that parasitic. Keep on it. Don't go back and forth, back and forth. Um, I mean, I guess if you had to do it all the time, then go back and forth, back and forth. But then again, you're messing with a whole bunch of stuff, you know, their system, and you know, one parasitic may affect this species of parasite, but only minimally affect this species. And one parasitic may have high dose at 12 hours peak plasma level, and then another one may have peak plasma level for 24 hours after application and for the next 2 weeks. All of this you're dealing with, it affects your animals, their metabolism, it affects their liver, their kidneys, their heart. So, and they're very pervasive. You're talking about, we don't have medication like that. Um, well, I mean, we do. It's very few medications that humans take are they so expansive that they infiltrate every single level. Most of ours were concerned if something goes past the blood-borne barrier, like brain. Does it go into brain tissue? We don't really have many medications that also go into our skin oils, our hair follicles, our hair, the bottom of the hair. Um, we don't have a lot of medication like that. So you're talking about medication that infiltrates everything, and it has a long-term effect. If you have to use it again and again and again and again, guarantee it's going to have long-term effect. Maybe liver scarring, maybe damaging kid nephro. Um, what do you call it? Death of nephrotic pathology? Killing those filters in the kidneys, destroying them. Kind of like high glucose, repeated high glucose does. It destroys the filters in the kidney, which also affects a whole cascade of other stuff. You know, big cause for glaucoma and eye pressure, stuff like that. But yeah, you want to minimize your use of the antiparasitics, and if you can control the exposure by controlling your house, be a house Nazi. Nope, take your shoes off. Oh no, you walk the dog, and um, you'll walk the dog only on the sidewalk, and your dog, this be a house Nazi. Yep, the cat can go in the porch, but no further than the porch. Or the dog, we want to take him to the park. No, you can't take the dog to the park. You can walk him on the street or the sidewalk. We don't want any parasites on the dog to come in the house. Stuff like that. You can be a house Nazi. Hey, take those shoes off. Shoes stay on the porch or in the mudroom. They don't come inside the main entrance of the house. Stuff like that. So you can minimize the use of parasitics on your animal. Antiparasitics. Sometimes you will have to use them, but it's important to know if this denaturing, if my theory is right. It's very concerning. Nobody wants to repeatedly apply something to their animal that only has minimal effect.